everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the LifeWrap Physical Security Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Value, and my guest today is AJ DeRosa, Chief Revenue Officer at Evolv Technologies. Now, AJ, before we hit record, you and I had a really interesting chat about some of the challenges organizations and venues now face as we kind of reopen from COVID. How has COVID changed the security landscape for events?
Well, Robert, first off, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being on the podcast. With regards to how things have changed for these large venues, COVID's really changed the way people can have to experience security. In the physical security land, it's been a very analog technology and analog approach, which means there's a lot of touching going on. There's a lot of things coming out of pockets, people being wanded, people being frisked. And it really depends on the security paradox. So we call it the security paradox. And what that means is, with the analog technologies that we've had in the past, in order to get really, really high levels of security, it had to be very, very invasive. And if you didn't want high levels, if you wanted a great customer experience, then you didn't have any security. So really what needed to be solved for these venues with COVID was this ability to not only be able to have a heightened level of security and peace of mind, but also be able to have a great customer experience. Everybody was a bit miffed when COVID hit and how to do that. And there have been technologies that have been created like Evolv that allow for our customers to be able to have not only great security, but a great customer experience. And we found that through many of our customers in the amusement park industry and the NFL and the MLB, customers that came to us and said, we cannot open unless we figure out how not to have people take things out of their pockets, how to not be invasive. And we were in the fortunate position at the time to be able to provide a solution for them. That was their challenge, is how do we get all these people, how do we get tens of thousands of people into a facility without being invasive, without touching their stuff, and in a way that's safe, right? Because with COVID, what happened was you really weaponized the human. You've got a virus now that's being spread, and it can be dangerous for people. So they needed to figure out ways to be able to do this safely. That was number one focus for them in trying to solve that problem from an entrance perspective and an ingress point of view.
Right. There was a lot of things that I kind of wanted to unpack, but one of the keywords that I kind of tapped into there in your answer was considering the customer experience. And a lot of the things that you talk about at Evolv is democratizing security. Can you explain to our listeners exactly what you kind of mean by that?
Sure. When we at Evolv talk about democratizing security, what that means is, let me give a little context as well. So when the company was started by two co-founders that were affected by the Boston Marathon, September 11th. They really wanted to create a situation where large venues, any venue, could really be able to create a safer atmosphere for people, but also do it in a way that wasn't invasive. So that's how they came out with Evolv. In 2013, they started the company. And through some iterations of product, we came out with the Express product, and we've been able to really do that. And what we mean by democratizing security is giving not only those places that typically had security measures and metal detectors, but also give the performing arts and the museums and the theaters and the other areas that have always wanted to have security, but never really wanted to put security in because of that security paradox. They wanted their customer experience to be what it needed to be. So when we say democratizing security, we mean one is we can offer a type of customer experience and security to all across the board. And we can do it at a cost from a business model that's much different. So we can do it. We're 70% less in most cases from an ROI perspective, because we can get 10 times the amount of people in through our system based on the remote sensors and the machine learning technology that we use to utilize it. So it's over time. It becomes cheaper and more affordable. And we do it in a subscription basis. So we do it in a model that's more an OpEx expense than it is a CapEx expense. So when we say democratizing security, I mean, we're offering that security to everybody. Whereas in the past, it really was the chosen few who were really focused on that. And just to unpack that a little bit more, when we talk about the 20th century's physical security, right? It's very analog. There's a lot of evasiveness that goes on there. You need a 2021 technology to solve the issues that we have today in 2021 from a COVID point of view, from gun ownership point of view, from anxiety and mental health point of view. There's so much going on right now that you need a way to be able to protect all, but make all feel safe in a way that they can experience in a way that's meaningful for them and that they can enjoy.
Right. Just can you unpack a little bit more too about the importance of considering that customer experience when they're kind of visiting some of these venues and why that's so important from what you guys are doing?
The entryway, or as I like to call it, the gateway, is the first experience that a customer has, right? And that customer experience is really important for them when it comes to coming to a venue or facility. And the way I like to explain it is the old way of physical security was you were guilty until proven innocent. Come in, we're going to check you. We're checking everybody, go. And what we've done and what technology has been able to do now with remote sensors and weapons detection and AI is flip that on its head and really say, you know what? All of your patrons are probably innocent, except for those few that aren't. And we're going to find those. And we're going to be more prescriptive of how we find those with the technology that we create. So that way, the majority who are good actors can flow right in and have a great experience. And the minority who are the bad actors, well, they can be picked out and they can be dealt with based on what the security process is for those venues. What that does is that initial experience for the customer is something that you can't replace. We have a few customers who implemented, an NFL team who implemented this and literally went from a customer experience, a CSAT rating on the day from 2.6 to 4.5 or something. I might have the numbers a little off, but it was the drastic, increase in customer experience and customer satisfaction. And people would be surprised how important that is for customers at facilities and venues, that is an easy process. What happens then is you get more people in and you get more people in faster. What does that mean? That means better F&B, food and beverage. They can get to those beers faster and those sodas faster and to the tchotchkes faster that they're trying to sell within those venues. And I had a conversation with one of our performing arts customers about 6 months ago, and she said it really well. She said, for performing arts centers, we have a very small window to get people in the door and get them to the bar and get them to the food and get them to the beverage and get them to what they need to do. And what this type of technology and what the newer technologies are providing for them with this touchless screening is really the ability to get people in faster. So that way they can get to the F&B faster and then get to their seats and not miss any of the show.
As you were kind of giving that answer, I was reflecting back on my own experiences going to some venues. I mean, after 9/11, going to the airport was no longer a fun experience, but you got to go through it anyway because you have to travel. But then when I'm thinking about events and concerts and all these kind of places, I'm a customer, I'm a consumer. I have those choices. And if I'm not happy about it, it's not the thing that I'm going to line up to and give my dollars to go to again.
As these bottlenecks occur, they become soft targets. So where there's crowds of people, that's a target outside of the safe place, right? Which is getting through security. I mean, and also from a customer experience perspective, if you look at a couple examples, like at the US Open, this past US Open, the long security lines, people had to wait so long that they missed some of the matches. They're not happy about that. And who do they blame with regards to that? They blame the security process. And when you look at the Nationals and what happened to the Nationals, the gunshots were out in the parking lot, but people inside were truly worried. And that could have been inside. So there's these things happening. And really the goal from a physical security perspective with the technology that we have today is that we can give people the experience they want, but also give them the peace of mind that they need, that when things like this happen, they feel safe.
That was an interesting keyword that I clue in there with the lineups out front becoming soft targets. Beyond just having the big lineups out in front of the door, what are the big security risks and the security concerns that having this slow check-in process can create for event venues?
Well, I mean, you see it in a lot of places. Like if you look into Europe, actually, in the UK with Martin's Law, that there's a whole law around having to get people into venues fast enough so that way there aren't large groups of people where there could be a bad act. So anytime you have a bottleneck, that is typically the bad stuff happens right before security. What these venues and facilities try to do is push the perimeter out as far as they can from the venue. And so you'll see them trying to push the perimeter out more and more when they're doing these things. And, there's different types of technology to do that. If you take Evolv Express, for instance, this is where we check for weapons when people come in. We digitize that information. We can send it to a special operations command within the facility. But there's also adjacent technologies like that are out there. VMS systems, video management systems that can be working in the perimeter and looking for people that have weapons outside of pockets using computer vision to alert that SOC as well, and also be able to do inside the venue as well. So there's lots of technologies. There's technologies now that can be utilized in tandem along with our types of technology to really create a much safer environment for these facilities and venues, because the last thing they want is bottlenecks. Bottlenecks are the things that make directors of security most nervous. I had a conversation with an NFL team where we were looking at where we would place our systems, and they had an issue where with metal detectors, where the lines would really back up and they'd actually back up into the streets. That's dangerous because you don't even need to be a bad actor with a weapon on you. All you need is a car and to be in a bad mood and kind of drive through that. So being able to actually solve that problem was a big deal for them because the bottleneck didn't happen and it was able to flow through into the venue.
I'm just kind of thinking about someone who's the director of security for one of these events. And so it's very easy to be kind of focused inwards on what's going on in the field, the rowdy fans and the internal challenges. But that's kind of the main spot that we might often overlook is just what's going on behind us outside of the entrance.
I can tell you right now, most directors of security I've ever talked to, that's all they're thinking about. What's going on outside of the entrance, right? Because that's where they're most susceptible. The practices they put in place to get people in, they feel best about because they put them there. They put that security measures and those processes in. They feel the most open or the most, what's the word I'm looking for, at risk, if you will, is at that point at which they don't have control. And how can you mitigate that? Well, you can mitigate that by not having the groups out there and by getting them into the safe place faster.
One of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier was, event security has always been much more analog. That might be one of the reasons, but what are kind of the reasons why people have been kind of slow to adopt more digitalization?
I think it hadn't gotten here yet. And not only that, but directors of securities and CISOs, they have a responsibility. And that responsibility is to keep people safe. When you've utilized a way of doing things for a long period of time and it's predominantly worked, it's hard to go a different route because they have a lot of risk. And we're not just disrupting an industry that, we have to use new technology, but we have to disrupt an industry that is used to doing something the same way and it working. But now what's happening is the world is changing. And with that change and with the digitization, now what you're starting to see is the early adopters come in, and we're seeing many of them. And now we're actually even getting more momentum out there with many direct securities are saying, we just can't do it the way we used to. We understand that now. We have to do it a new way. And, you talked about COVID. COVID's interesting, especially interesting story for us as a company, because when we created Express, we didn't create it for COVID. We created it years before. When we started thinking about it, we created it for the performing arts and the theaters and the museums, all those places that didn't have security, couldn't have security. That's why Express was created. And then this pandemic happened. And that really wasn't a catalyst for us. It was a tailwind. And that tailwind kind of pushed us in the sense, these places have typically used metal detectors and this analog technology will also need to use us now or need to use us, technologies like us now to get people in faster and touchless. And the world is going touchless. We talked about this earlier. The world's going touchless in every aspect of our lives. It just makes sense that digitization and the touchless aspect and frictionless aspect would reach physical security. It's just taking the world to change a little bit for that to really, and also it took the technology to come. I mean, this is newer technology over the last 2 to 3 to 4 years, right? That we've been creating and defining and putting to play. So it takes time for that disruption to really take momentum. And now we're seeing it. We're seeing it really start to take effect and we're seeing people start to embrace it.
Well, COVID's kind of been the catalyst to challenge a lot of assumptions just in general. I mean, working from home and so it's not really a big surprise that it would have an impact on how we manage events and things like that too.
It changes the status quo. In addition to changing the experience for the customer, the experience for the facility that they get from being able to capture analytics and insights and data from digital sensors. So when I talk about what we do as a company, is we're a remote sensing, machine learning, AI company. We use remote sensors to detect different types of metal. We use machine learning to figure out what that metal is, the composition, the size, the shape. And then we take computer vision and we can take a picture and put a box on something. We've taken all that AI technology, machine learning technology, remote sensing technology, and we put it to play in a way that can make a decision in a split second of you're safe, you're not. But in addition to that, because there are these sensors, we can also take the data that we capture, how many people are coming in, where are they coming in, when are they coming in? And we can send all that data and integrate that data in a single pane of glass for our customers so they can make better decisions on safety. They can make better decisions on business. They can make better decisions for facility and the guards. So there's a whole host of goodness that comes out of the digitization. It's not just the volume and the customer experience. It's also the customers our customers' experience, who now take all this data and utilize it in a way that's going to be beneficial for them to keep the people that they're serving safe and also make sure that they have the best experience they can within the venue.
I guess at this point, I'd be kind of thinking like, okay, if I'm the CESO for a professional sports team or some sort of venue, and I want to start thinking much more about the customer experience when they show up at my arena, at my stadium, where would you suggest that they kind of get started in that process?
As far as how do they capture that data?
Even if they've never really thought of that maybe before, maybe they've just been focused on keeping the bad guys out. How do I kind of start creating that better customer experience when people are showing up at my gates?
I think one is you have to go out and see the new technologies for yourself. You really have to experience them in the wild, if you will. So we have customers like the Atlanta Falcons and the San Francisco Giants where people can go to their venues and visit them and see our products in the wild, if you will, and how they work and what they do. And then do your research on the different types of technologies that are out there. So that way you better understand what technology can do in the physical security space now, because there are lots of things it can do. We're an example of that. And we're very specific at the weapons detection at this point. And then kind of take that back to your facility and your venue and have a conversation. And don't just have the conversation around security, have the conversation around customer experience. It's really about how do we create this situation where I get my level of security, I'm good here. How do we increase the experience? And how do you work internally within your organization? We go all the way to the C-suite. There's a lot of conversations. We have director of security, we have chief security officers, chief operations officers now we're talking to, CFOs, CEOs. And it's a much larger conversation now because it really does hit home with, are those customers going to come back based on the way they experienced their entry into the facility and how they got to where they had to go within the facility? So I think it's just about research, having an open mind and really seeing it in the wild, because I think that when you see it, when I came to Evolv 18 months ago and I came here and started helping scale the teams and building out the organization, what sold me was the second I saw one in the wild. I was like, oh, you can explain it all you want, but when you see these technologies work, it's really what kind of hammers it home. And then you can start thinking in your mind, how can I utilize that in my facility, in my venue? What are the concepts of operations? What are the situations that I can build in my facilities to make the experience the best it can possibly be for the patrons that are coming into our facility?
Very, very cool. AJ, we're coming up on all the time that I promised to steal from you this week. I appreciate you coming on the show. What is the big takeaway that you want listeners to remember from our conversation?
The big takeaway, I think, is really all around customer experience and the fact that today, in the world we live in, with the technologies we have like Evolv Express, you do not have to use the older analog ways of technology. There are newer technologies out there that are going to create a customer experience for your patrons that is going to make them committed to your facility, your venue, your team, your performing arts center for a lifetime. And it's really going to make the difference for them as they start going places, especially in the post-COVID age. And especially when you think about what's going on around the world and gun ownership, anxiety, mental health. It's not all about active shooters anymore. It's really about rage, and it's about not being able to tell when these things are going to happen. So just open your mind to that technology, take a look, experience it, see it in a wild, because there are things out there that can really kind of increase your customer experience for your patrons and really increase the revenues and increase the satisfaction for your company, facility, venue, park, what have you.
And AJ, can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on at Evolv right now and how maybe listeners could get in touch?
Well, yeah, at Evolv, we're working on all kinds of things. I can't really talk too much about what we're working on. What I can say is we continue to want to innovate. We continue to want to build great products for our customers. And we continue to want to focus on utilizing technology to be a solution for customer experience and safety, and really make the world a safer place. That's what we're working on. And we're going to continue to innovate to do that.
And how can listeners get in touch if they want to reach out?
Well, you can get in touch with me directly if you like at aderosa@evolvtechnology.com, or just go to our website and you can put in for a demo there and we'll get you in contact with the right people.
All right. AJ, thanks for joining me today.
Robert, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Again, that was AJ DeRosa, Chief Revenue Officer of Evolv Technologies. That's a wrap on this week's show. Thanks for listening to another episode of the LifeRaft Physical Security Podcast. If you'd like to hear more, be sure to subscribe by hitting that follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to your podcast. And if you'd like more insights on building a successful threat intelligence program, be sure to check out our website at liferafinc.com. That's liferafinc.com. And I hope you tune in next time.